Good evening to all of you out there. My name is Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our discussion, the Hurricane Hub for Thursday, May 25th, 2023. Posting a video a little late this evening, so probably will not get viewed by most of you till tomorrow, but still going to post it to have something out there. But we do have a lot on the market to go over today. We have First of all, you could see in the background of the thumbnail, yes, this is a cyclone. This is a tropical cyclone, a typhoon to be exact, in the Western Pacific, and it is by probably one of the most unexplainable terms, an absolutely marvelous looking system. And we're actually going to start with that. This is a typhoon. If you remember us talking about a system in the Western Pacific, Typhoon Mawar. Now it is officially Super Typhoon Mawar, and I mean, you could just look at the satellite picture to confirm that. You don't even need to look at other factors. This is an absolute massive. This is an absolute beast. And what can I say? Pictures are worth 1,000 words. This is an absolutely incredible system, and this is sometimes one of the products that we could see in the Western Pacific Basin. I will give credit to this system that we do not have systems like these in the Western Pacific as rare as you think we do. Because, of course, multiple factors going into it. One being the Pacific, specifically the Western Pacific, is much larger of a basin than other basins in the world. And also, of course, it is much deeper. There's a lot more warmer water over a large portion of a large portion of ocean. So it's indeed much warmer, much more favorable in order for a storm like this to produce. But once again, it is still very massive. And we could take a look at it on CIMS Tropical Cyclones, CIMSS, University of Wisconsin website. You guys already know I love this website to death. You could really take this website to my deathbed. I'll bring it. I love this website so much. But putting that all aside, this storm is at 155 knots, which, if we were to translate that in the Atlantic, that is 180 miles an hour. So this is a high-end, top-tier Category 5, and I believe the pressure is somewhere in the low 900s, like 903. I gotta check the latest Joint Typhoon Warning Center initialization, but the last time I checked, the storm was at a pressure of 903 millibars. So this is definitely one of the most top tier storms you could really get, and once again occurring in the Western Pacific. And I'll show you that here. As I did mention before, the Western Pacific is a very large basin, so of course, compared to what we're usually used to, this is not as rare as you would think. And we could just go back to where this is on the map, roughly 140 east and 15 north, and we could go here to this map, by the way, by CDAS from Tropical Tidbits, Dr. Levi Cowman's site. A very great website, has all resources tropical that are very, very indeed useful and handy. And this will really quickly go. So this is 10 north, 15 north, and we go to 140 east. So the storm is roughly located right here. And look at the sea surface temperatures, all of them solidly in 29 degrees Celsius, 30 and even 31 degrees Celsius mark, solidly over an area of ocean that is hundreds and hundreds of miles across and very deep as well. So there's absolutely no reason to believe that this doesn't have enough energy to get to this point, is that this didn't have the resources to get to this point, because if the resources weren't there, it wouldn't have gotten to this point. But still, we're here, and this is a very massive storm. Luckily, I do not believe this is threatening any land, and that's actually one of the good things about the Western Pacific, is that we could have such typhoons, basically hurricanes. Typhoons, they're the same exact weather phenomenon, just different names because of different locations of the world, but still the same exact type of phenomenon. We could get massive storms like these that are absolute monsters in intensity and sheer size that can go out to sea, because once again, as I mentioned before, the Western Pacific is a much larger basin, so we're able to have the resources for storms as intense as this. but at least they're able to go out to sea because there's a lot of vast ocean that storms could turn out on, compared to land. As compared to the Atlantic, which is much smaller, it is more likely to run into land because of the little amount of ocean we have in the Atlantic compared to the Pacific, but still also because of that probably helps with why we don't have really strong storms like we do here in the Western Pacific. Nonetheless, this is still an incredible, absolutely it's a beauty in some form. It's absolutely a beast and a monster, but it's a beauty. It's a marvelous beauty in some way that I just can't explain. And honestly, that's what really makes these hurricanes so, these tropical cyclones, this weather phenomenon of tropical cyclone, especially when we have storms like these, that's just makes them so interesting. It just draws you in, and it's not out of death and destruction. It's really out of how this all works and how we're able to get something that you just really can't get all that often. Obviously, not too rare, especially considering the part of the world that it's in, but still, it's incredible in its nature, and it's definitely undeniable, certainly. But moving on, as I did mention, a lot to talk about, including today, the NOAA has released their official 2023 hurricane season forecast. This was as of this morning. And what are they calling for? A near normal season. And interestingly enough, I found equal chances for an above or below normal season. So, as I did mention before, it does honestly kind of put into perspective the somewhat of uncertainty that we're looking at, for this season. And I did actually find very interesting, first of all, just bringing up their graph. This is the graph that they have: 12 to 17 named storms, 5 to 9 hurricanes, and 1 of 4 major hurricanes. And of course, they do factor in El Nino and the warm Atlantic. And they also have a nice graph showing all the names as well. Of course, the first name going to be Arlene when we do get that, minus the subtropical storm we had in January, which was, of course, not operationally a system, so it did not get Arlene. So Arlene is still the first name on the list. But to what I want to get to, the NOAA did actually, very interestingly, actually on their article, they have a whole article to this, and it's actually linked in their tweet. This is the link to the article that they have. It's the NOAA Communications Twitter, if you want to search it up. They have an article, and this is what it is. And I did actually highlight this part of the article because I found it very interesting that they mentioned that El Nino's potential influence, because of course they do say, they have a high potential for El Nino. Not a secret at all. NOAA is very aggressive with its El Nino forecast for this year, but they do say its potential influence on storm development could be offset by favorable conditions local to the tropical Atlantic basin, the very warm Atlantic. Those conditions include the potential for an above normal West African monsoon, which produces African easterly waves and seeds for some of the stronger and long-lived Atlantic storms, and warmer than normal sea surface temperatures in the tropical Atlantic Ocean and Caribbean Sea, which creates more energy to fuel storm development. And what are they talking about? They're talking about this: a very warm Atlantic basin, which I find, once again, to be just absolutely incredible, because it's honestly not really all that often you see an Atlantic this warm like we are seeing it this year, really in the top category of warm Atlantics. And I did find it interesting that, yes, while they are expecting very high confidence for an El Nino, that they actually did mention that there is a very warm Atlantic, and indeed there could be some sort of competition between the two factors, which is what I think makes this forecast very interesting. And as I did mention before, very warm Atlantic, we're beginning to warm back up now, especially. But if you did notice, the Caribbean really beginning to spark up in its warmth. And we actually have something going on in the Caribbean that I'll mention a little bit later on in the video. But the Atlantic, very warm, has increased in its warmth. The latest value of 0.77 degrees Celsius, so almost 0.8 degrees Celsius above normal. And you think about 0.8 degrees Celsius above normal might not be a lot, but if you're talking about it across thousands of miles of ocean and several meters deep as well, if you really think about it, that is actually quite a bit of energy that is there, and enough energy that will probably alter the atmosphere in some sort of way. So that's why I find it very interesting that the NOAA did mention it, and we'll certainly see what happens this season. We know that the West African monsoon as well, which is something else that they pointed out, stronger West African monsoon goes hand in hand with this very warm Atlantic, and West African monsoon also tends to be a kind of facilitating factor for creating more favorable conditions in the Atlantic. You know that by now. I mentioned it many times before. So it'll all be very interesting to see what happens. And speaking of the Atlantic, Michael Fisher, he tweeted this 2 days ago, but still very much valid because models are still showing the same thing as of the latest runs and as of today in general. He does say the North Atlantic will experience anomalous weak 525 millibar winds over much of the MDR this week. These weekend trade winds will likely facilitate additional warming as we head toward the start of the hurricane season. And I guess what he's talking about is a bunch of these blues, because this graph is a little different than what we usually look at. We usually see the graphs in reverse colors. The weekend trades are the yellow and orange and reds, while the enhanced trades are the blues. His map is a little different, but you generally see a lot of blues over the North Atlantic, over the MDR. Very warm, very conducive for warmth, because less stronger trade winds means less upwelling, and you can see right here. Just continued weak trades across the Atlantic expected for probably the next week or so. And on top of the fact that we already have a very warm Atlantic, and we're probably going to see a facilitator for even more warmth to come, this will all be very interesting to see how it does play into the season. And boy, must I tell you, this season is going to be very interesting, something we'll need to watch very closely NOAA's coming out and saying it too, that we have some sort of competing element to this year as well. So definitely take into consideration when we talk about this season. We'll be very interested to see how all this plays on going forward. But want to mention really quickly, of course, shorter term, if you're not well aware enough, if you're not already aware enough, we have another area of invest, I believe, as of yesterday. This was added as of yesterday on the NOAA page. I was going to post a video yesterday. Didn't feel like it, but feel like doing it now, so I'm doing it now. So now that we're here, let's mention it. Of course, actually still though, not a really high chance of this developing, only a 10% chance, similar to the last one we had. Disorganized showers and thunderstorms off the coast of the southeastern United States associated with a front and a trough of low pressure, non-tropical, expected to develop along a frontal boundary Friday night. And this system appears likely for any subtropical or tropical cyclone development, since it's forecast to remain frontal, all generally moving northward and inland over the Carolinas late Saturday or Sunday. But they do mention, and this is actually very interesting, this is very important, especially since this weekend will be Memorial Day weekend. So those going out to the coast, looking to spend some time along the beaches, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but looks like we'll see gusty winds, dangerous surf and rip current conditions, as well as heavy rainfall expected for portions of the Carolinas and Virginia this weekend, and hazardous marine conditions as well. So keep in mind for all of these things, if you're heading out to the Carolinas this weekend, if you want local information, you could go to weather.gov, the National Weather Service website, or you could go to WPC NOAA, which is the Weather Prediction Center, and they all have more local information. But once again, kind of just pointing it out that this is not really expected to become much of anything, and I'll just show it on satellite right now. You can kind of see why it looks very broad, very messy, nothing really confined more or compact or tightened in one area, which is usually something we look for subtropical and tropical development. Both are needed to have a more tight, compact area of vorticity and spin, and this does not have that. This is also still frontal, so that is also something that we do not look for in tropical development and subtropical development too. We usually look for a closed, disconnected low from any fronts. It's an independent low, and this is clearly not what we're seeing with this. And I do want to mention as well the CDAS, also CDAS from Levi Cowan, Tropical Tidbits. Warm waters as well. While it's there, it's generally there along the Gulf Stream, 26 degrees, 27 degrees Celsius, and it'll probably warm up further as we go later on into the season and into the summer. Look at where we still are though along the Carolinas, the shelf water, more specifically along the shelf water, you see 24, 23 degrees Celsius, and we usually look for the threshold for tropical cyclone development at 26. And we do not have that along the coast, and in result, that is not really the favorable factor we're looking for when it comes to development of tropical systems. So definitely some factors working against it, and also want to point this out also from CIMSS, University of Wisconsin, my favorite website, the wind shear graphics, which I like to point out from time to time. That is on the models. That is not on the models that they have as a resource to look at, which, since wind shear is a very important factor when it comes to development. And what do you see? Red everywhere. High wind shear, so going to help keep a role in keeping this very disorganized and not able to tighten up or organize in any sort of way. So you don't really need to look at much else to then really get an idea that this is not really going to have a chance to develop. This will also kind of stay close to the coast all weekend, so really nothing going for it. But want to point out gusty winds, strong winds, dangerous surf and rip currents. Something that we do actually have as impacts of tropical cyclones as well. They can occur in non-tropical instances. This does not have to be tropical in order to bring impacts, and that's what we're going to see along the Carolinas coast this weekend. Strong gusty winds, heavy rain, and unfortunately it will impact this weekend as Memorial Day weekend, so keep in mind for that. But I just want to remind you once again, we don't have to have something tropical in order to bring impacts to areas like heavy rain and gusty winds. That is not exclusive to tropical cyclones. Heck, we see it all the time, especially with nor'easters and spring systems in the northeast, and even snowstorms in the winter. Replace the rain and snow, and you still get the same idea. Gusty winds, heavy snow, treacherous conditions to be outside. Very similar to tropical cyclones, only of course it's summer or early fall, depending on, of course, the year. But heavy rain, strong gusty winds, or sometimes beyond strong winds, very extreme winds, depends of course on the storm, but you get the general idea. It's very dangerous to be outside, so something very important to mention there. And we could also look at that on the model too, kind of taking it out up to tomorrow. This is tomorrow, then we go to Saturday, and I guess there is some sort of reason to kind of point this out, because this maybe does try to get some sort of vorticity signature going, does try to tighten up a little bit. But very important to mention, this is very near the coastline, and by Sunday morning this is already inland and would have probably not have had enough time, especially given the conditions we have, to really develop and try to get going. And I think we could actually look at satellite, I believe. Oh yeah, simulated IR, and this is actually something very cool that the models does have, and I could show it right here. This is actually going up back in model runs. Let me see if I could just take it to this, and I'll show you here. And you see on the satellite, this is roughly Saturday. I'll take it a little bit forward. After that, this is 19Z Saturday. So roughly when this is more of a tighter system that we see on the models that I just showed you on the 850 millibar vorticity, we saw more tight, compact signature in the vorticity. But in the cloud cover, look at this. It's all messy. It's all fanned out all over the place. Definitely nothing screaming subtropical or tropical development at all. So nothing of interest with this, of course, except weather conditions possibly to the Carolinas this weekend. So keep in mind for that. And then this kind of lingers as a system over the southeast going into early next week. So probably going to see more weather conditions of some sort of influence from this extending into early next week as well. I do want to extend the time frame though a little bit further than this weekend, and we're going to go out to next week. And this is something very interesting that I did see on the models. By the way, the website is weathernerds.org. And this is a website, another one that I'll be posting and kind of showing throughout the season. This has a very nice feature that I like to look at, and this is trackable lows ensemble members, and them showing, and the different ensemble members showing potential trackable lows in the future forecast. And this is the ECENS, the European Ensemble, when it comes to lows, and where you do see a lot of that is in the Caribbean, and that is indicative. I don't know what's sometimes happening with my English, but whatever, you get what I mean. There's a signal for something potentially going on in the Caribbean. MJO kind of gonna become a factor of some sort in potentially facilitating a more favorable look to potentially something to develop in the Caribbean sometime late next week as we head into early June, which, yes, next week is June. I believe Thursday is June 1st. And keep in mind that date as well, because I will be doing something special on June 1st, and I'll reveal it this weekend when I do an outlook and discussion on Saturday, as I normally would do. But bottom line, something very interesting, and not only the European is showing this, the European ensembles are showing this, but as well the GFS, they have a signal of some sort for something getting going in the Caribbean, which, by the way, is a climatology area that we usually look for in development. So I'm actually going to put this on a loop and you'll see it. This is starting today. And actually, let me see if I could speed this up a little bit. There we go. I'm going to speed it up. And you can see this is May 30th, May 31st, and this is now into early June. We're going in, and you see a bunch of lows around South America, possibly indicative of maybe some sort of Central American gyre. Some people beginning to speculate about that, but bottom line, potential for development is there early June, late May, something around the Caribbean. We'll watch that very closely. Once again, as I did mention, it's an area that's favorable for development of this time of year. And of course, sea surface temperature in that area are very warm. So maybe we'll see something that tries to develop. I'll have to see, but something very interesting nonetheless. And of course, we have this system in the Western Pacific to keep an eye on for those that are more interested in tracking globally, since of course there's nothing really going on in the Atlantic right now except this small area of interest that'll probably not do much in terms of tropical impacts in the tropical world. But of course, as I did mention, we'll probably have some sort of impacts non-tropical that'll still affect the weather, and that's always something very interesting to keep in mention. But with that being said, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to leave you to the rest of your evening. If you see this tomorrow, just know that I will post another video tomorrow or today, depending on when you see this. But I'll post another video tomorrow, kind of updating anything that goes on. And we'll see what happens. We'll see if the models may be uptrending something, and we'll of course keep you posted on that area of interest near the Carolinas. Just once again, know that it's probably not going to do anything too significant other than, of course, bring unsettled and nuisance-like weather to the Carolinas. Unfortunate, since this is the Memorial Day weekend that we're about to head into, but it is what it is. Other than that, I'm going to wrap it up for this evening. Stay safe, peace, love, and kindness to all, and we will talk again later today or tomorrow, of course, depending on when you see this. Bye.